Didn't you hear what I was playing, Lane?
I didn't think it polite to listen, sir.
I'm sorry for that. For your sake. I don't play accurately. Anyone can play accurately. But I play with wonderful expression.
Yes.
As far as the piano is concerned, sentiment is my forte.
Yes, sir.
I keep science for life.
Yes, sir.
And speaking of the science of life, Lane, have you got the cucumber sandwiches cut for Lady Bracknell?
Yes, sir.
Oh, by the way, Lane, I see from your book that on Thursday night, when Lord Shorman and Mr. Worthing were dining with me, 8 bottles of champagne are entered as having been consumed.
Yes, sir. 8 bottles and a pint.
Why is it that at a bachelor's establishment the servants invariably drink the champagne? I ask merely for information.
I attribute it to the superior quality of the wine, sir. I have often observed that in married households, the champagne is very rarely of the first-rate brand.
Good heavens, is marriage so demoralising as that?
I think it is a pleasant state, sir. I have had very little experience of it myself. I have been married once. It was a consequence of a misunderstanding between myself and a young person.
I don't know that I am much interested in your family life, Lane.
It's not very interesting subject, sir. I don't think of it myself.
Perfectly natural, I'm sure. I will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Really? Lane's views on marriage seem somewhat lax. If the lower orders don't set us a good example, what on earth is the use of them? They seem to me, as a class, to have absolutely no sense of moral responsibility.
Mr. Earnest Worthing.
How are you, my dear Ernest? What brings you up to town?
Oh, pleasure, pleasure. What else should bring one anywhere? Eating as usual, I see, Algy.
I believe it is customary in good society to take some slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since last Thursday?
In the country.
What on earth do you do there?
Well, when one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses other people. It is excessively boring.
Who are the people you amuse?
Oh, neighbours, neighbours.
Got nice neighbours in your part of Shropshire?
Perfectly horrid. Never speak to one of them.
How immensely you must amuse them. Shropshire is your county, is it not?
Eh? Shropshire? Yeah, yes, of course. Hello. Why all these cups? Why cucumber sandwiches? Why such reckless extravagance in one so young? Who's coming to tea?
Merely Aunt Augusta and Gwendolen.
Oh, how perfectly delightful.
Yes, it's all very well. I'm afraid Aunt Augusta won't quite approve of your being here.
May I ask why?
My good fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolen is perfectly disgraceful. It's almost as bad as the way Gwendolen flirts with you.
I'm in love with Gwendolen. I've come up to town expressly to propose to her.
I thought you would come up for pleasure. I call that business.
Oh, how utterly unromantic you are.
I really don't see anything romantic in proposing. It is very romantic to be in love, but I really don't see anything romantic in a definite proposal. Why, one may be accepted. One usually is, I believe. Well, then the excitement is all over. The very essence of romance is uncertainty. If ever I do get married, I'll certainly try and forget the fact.
Oh, I have no doubt about that, dear Algy. The divorce courts were specially invented for people whose minds are so curiously constituted.
There's no use speculating on that subject, my dear fellow. Divorces are made in heaven. Please don't touch the cucumber sandwiches. Oh, they are made especially for Aunt Augusta.
Well, you have been eating them all the time.
That is quite a different matter. She's my aunt. Have some bread and butter. The bread and butter is for Gwendolen. Gwendolen is devoted to bread and butter.
Oh, and very good bread and butter it is too.
Yes, my dear fellow, you need not eat it as if you were going to eat it all. You behave as if you were married to her already. You are not married to her already, and I don't think you ever will be.
Why on earth do you say that?
Well, in the first place, girls never marry the men they flirt with. Girls don't think it right.
Oh, that is nonsense.
It isn't. It is a great truth. It accounts for the extraordinary number of bachelors one sees all over the place. In the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent?
My dear fellow, Gwendolen is my first cousin, and before I allow you to marry her, you will have to clear up the whole question of Cecily.
Cecily? What on earth do you mean? I don't know what you mean, LG, by Cecily. I don't know anyone of the name of Cecily.
Bring me the cigarette case Mr. Worthing left in the smoking room the last time he dined here.
Yes, sir.
You mean to say you've had my cigarette case all this time? I wish to goodness you would let me know. I've been writing frantic letters to Scotland Yard about it. I was very nearly offering a large reward.
Well, I wish you would offer some money. I happen to be more than usually hard up.
Well, there's no use offering a large reward now that the thing is found.
That is quite mean of you, Ernest, I must say. However, it makes no matter. For now that I look on the inscription inside, I see the thing isn't yours after all.
Of course it's mine. You've seen me with it 100 times, and you have no right whatsoever to read what is written inside. It is a very ungentlemanly thing to read a private cigarette case.
No, it is absurd to have a hard and fast rule about what one should read and what one shouldn't. Over half of modern culture depends on what one shouldn't read.
I'm quite well aware of the fact, and I don't propose to discuss modern culture. It isn't the sort of thing one should talk of in private. I simply want my cigarette case back.
Yes, but this isn't your cigarette case. This cigarette case is a present given by someone of the name of Cecily. And you said you didn't know anyone of that name.
Well, if you want to know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes, charming old lady too, lives in Tunbridge Wells. Now, just give it back to me now, Jake.
Yes, but why does she call herself Little Cecily, if she is your aunt who lives at Tunbridge Wells? From Little Cecily, with her fondest love to her.
My dear fellow, what on earth is there in that? Some aunts are tall, some aunts are not tall. That is a matter that surely an aunt may be allowed to decide for herself. You seem to think that every aunt should be exactly like your aunt. It's absurd. For heaven's sake, just give me my cigarette case back!
Yes, but why did your aunt call you her dear uncle? From Little Cecily, with her fondest love to her dear Uncle Jack. Well, there is no objection, I admit, to an aunt being a small aunt. But why an aunt, no matter what her size may be, should call her own nephew her uncle, I can't quite make out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all. It is Ernest.
It isn't Ernest, it's Jack.
But you have always told me it were Ernest. I have introduced you to everyone as Ernest. But you answer to the name of Ernest. You look as if your name were Ernest. You are the most earnest-looking man I've ever seen in my life. It is perfectly absurd you're saying that your name were not Ernest. It's on your card. Here is one of them. Mr. Ernest Worthing, before the Albany. I'll keep this as proof that your name were Ernest, if ever you attempt to deny it to me, or to Gwendolen, or to anyone else.
Well, my name is Ernest in the town and Jack in the country. And the cigarette case was given to me in the country.
Yes, but why does your aunt call you her dear uncle? Come on, boy, you'd much better have the thing out at once.
My dear Algy, you talk exactly as though you were a dentist. It is very vulgar to talk like a dentist when one isn't a dentist. It produces a false impression.
That is exactly what dentists always do. Now go on, tell me the whole thing. I may mention that I've always suspected you of being a confirmed and secret Bunburyist, and I'm quite sure of it now.
Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean by a Bunburyist?
I'll explain to you the meaning of that incomparable expression as soon as you are kind enough to inform me why you were Ernest in the town and Jack in the country.
Well, produce my cigarette case first.
Here it is. Now produce your explanation, and pray make it improbable.
My dear fellow, there is nothing improbable about my explanation at all. In fact, it's perfectly ordinary. The old Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a little boy, made me in his will guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who addresses me as uncle from motives of respect that you could not possibly appreciate, Lives at my place in the country under the charge of her admirable governess, Miss Prism.
Where is that place in the country, by the way?
Oh, that is nothing to you, dear boy. You are not going to be invited. I may tell you candidly, the place is not in Shropshire.
Oh, I suspected that, my dear fellow. I have bumburied all over Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. Now go on. Why are you Ernest in the town and Jack in the country?
Algy, I don't expect you to understand my real motives. You're hardly serious enough. When one is placed in a position of guardian, one has to adopt a very high moral tone on all subjects, and seeing as a high moral tone can hardly be said to conduce very much to either one's health or one's happiness, I've always pretended to have a younger brother of the name of Earnest, who lives in the Albany and gets into the most dreadful scrapes. That, my dear friend, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
The truth is rarely pure and never simple. Modern life would be so very tedious if it were either. And modern literature a complete impossibility.
That wouldn't at all be a bad thing.
Oh, literary criticism is not your forte, my dear fellow. Don't try it. You should leave that to the people who haven't been at university. They do it so well in the daily papers. No, what you really are is a Bumbriist. I was quite right in saying you were a Bumbriist. You are one of the most advanced Bumbriists I know.
What on earth do you mean?
You have invented a very useful younger brother called Earnest, in order that you may be able to go up to town as often as you like. And I have invented an invaluable permanent invalid called Bunbury, in order that I may be able to go down into the country whenever I choose. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. If it wasn't for Bunbury's extraordinarily bad health, for instance, well, I wouldn't be able to dine with you tonight at Willis's. Well, I've really been engaged to Aunt Augusta for more than a week.
I haven't asked you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
I know. You're absurdly careless when it comes to sending out invitations. It's very foolish of you. Nothing annoys people so much as not receiving invitations.
Well, you'd much better dine with your Aunt Augusta.
Oh, I haven't the slightest intention of doing anything of the kind. To begin with, I dine there on Monday, and once a week is quite enough to dine with one's own relations. In the second place, whenever I do dine there, I am always treated as a member of the family, and sent down with either no women at all, or 2. In the third place, I know precisely whom she will place me next to tonight. She will place me next to Mary Farquhar, who always flirts with her own husband across the dinner table. That is not very pleasant. Indeed, it is not even decent. And that sort of thing is enormously on the increase. The amount of women in London who flirt with their own husbands is perfectly scandalous. It looks so bad. It is simply washing one's clean linen in public. Besides, now that I know you to be a confirmed and secret Bumbriist, I naturally want to talk to you about Bumburying. I want to show you the rules.
No, I'm not a Bunburyist at all. If Gwendolen accepts me, I'm going to kill my brother. Indeed, I think I'll kill him in any case. Cecily is a little too much interested in him. It is rather a bore. So, I'm going to get rid of Ernest, and I strongly advise you do the same with with your invalid friend who has the absurd name.
Nothing will induce me to part with Bunbury. And indeed, if you ever do get married, it seems to me incredibly problematic. You will be very glad to know Bunbury. A man who marries without knowing Bunbury has a very tedious time of it.
That is nonsense. If I marry a charming girl like Gwendolen, and she is the only girl I ever saw in my life I would marry, I certainly won't want to know Bunbury.
Well, then your wife will. You don't seem to realise that in a married household, 3 is company and 2 is not.
That, my dear young friend, is the theory that the corrupt French drama has been propounding for the last 50 years.
Yes, and that the happy English home has more than proved in half the time.
Don't try to be cynical. It's perfectly easy to be cynical.
My good fellow, it isn't easy to be anything nowadays. Such a lot of beastly competition about. That must be Aunt Augusta. Only relatives or creditors ever ring in that Wagnerian manner. Now, if I get her out of the way for just 10 minutes, so that you may have an opportunity of proposing to Gwendolen, may I dine with you tonight at Willis's?
I suppose so, if you want.
Yes, but you must be serious about it. I hate people who are not serious about meals. So shallow of them.
Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.
Good afternoon, dear Algernon. I hope you have been behaving very well.
I'm feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
That is not quite the same thing. In fact, the two things rarely go together.
Dear me, you are smart.
Oh, I'm always smart. Am I not, Mr. Worthing?
Oh, you're quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Well, I hope I'm not that. That would leave no room for development, and I intend to develop in many directions.
I'm sorry that we are a little late, Algernon, but I was obliged to call upon dear Lady Harbury, who I have not seen since her poor husband's death. I never saw a woman so altered. She looks quite 20 years younger. And now I have a cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta. Lane, why are there no cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them specially.
There were no cucumber sandwiches in the market, sir. I went there twice.
No cucumbers.
Not even, yes, sir, not even for any money.
Thank you, Lane. That will do.
Thank you, sir.
I am greatly distressed, Aunt Augusta, about there being no cucumbers, not even for ready money.
It really makes no matter, Algernon, for I had some crumpets with Lady Harbury, who seems to me to be living entirely for pleasure now.
I hear her hair has turned quite gold from grief.
It certainly has changed colour, from what cause I, of course, cannot say. I have quite a treat for you tonight, Algernon. I'm going to send you down with Mary Farquhar. She's such a nice woman, so attentive to her husband. It is a delight to watch them.
I am afraid, Aunt Augusta, I shall have to give up the pleasure of dining with you tonight after all.
I do hope not, Algernon. It will put my table completely out, and it will mean your uncle will have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he is accustomed to that.
It is a great bore, and I need hardly say a real disappointment to me. But the fact is, I have just had a telegram to say that my poor friend Bunbury is very ill again. They seem to think I should be with him.
It is very strange. This Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from incurably bad health.
Oh yes, Bunbury's a dreadful invalid.
Well, Algernon, I think it is high time that this Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he was going to live or die. This shilly-shallying with the question is quite absurd. Nor do I in any way approve of this modern sympathy with invalids. I consider it morbid. Illness of any kind is hardly a thing to be encouraged in others. I'm always telling that to your poor uncle. Not that he seems to take much notice as far as any improvement in his ailments are concerned. But I would be very much obliged if you could ask Mr. Bunbury from me if he'd be kind enough not to have a relapse next Saturday. But I rely on you to arrange my music for me, and it is my last reception, and one wants something that will encourage conversation, particularly at the end of the season, when everybody has said whatever it is they have to say, which in most cases was probably not much.
I'll speak to Bunbury, Aunt Augusta, if he is still conscious, and I think I can promise he'll be all right by Saturday. Of course, the music is a great difficulty. You see, if one plays bad music, well, then people don't listen. And if one plays good music, well, then people don't talk. But I'll run over the programme I've drawn out. If you'll kindly come into the next room for a moment.
Thank you, Algernon. It is very thoughtful of you. I'm sure the programme will be delightful after a few explorations. French songs I cannot possibly allow. People always seem to think they are improper and either look shocked, which is vulgar, or laugh, which is worse. But German sounds a thoroughly respectable language, and yes, I believe it is so. Gwendolen, you will accompany me.
Certainly, Mamma.
Charming day it has been, Miss Fairfax.
I'm afraid don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I always feel quite certain that they mean something else, and that makes me so nervous.
I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I am never wrong.
And I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I would certainly advise you to do so. Mamma has a way of coming back into a room suddenly that I've often had to speak with her about.
Miss Fairfax, ever since I met you, I have admired you more than any girl I've ever met since I met you.
Yes, I'm quite well aware of that. And at any rate, I often wished, in public, you'd a bit more demonstrative. For me, you've always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you, but we live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. The fact is constantly mentioned in the more expensive monthly magazines, and has reached the provincial pulpits, I'm told. And my ideal has always been to love someone of the name of Earnest. There is something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. The moment that Algernon first mentioned to me he had a friend called Earnest, I knew I was destined to love you.
Gwendolyn, you really love me.
Passionately.
Oh, darling, you don't know how happy you've made me.
Oh, my own Earnest.
But you don't mean to say you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Ernest.
What? But your name is Earnest.
Yes, I know it is, but suppose it was something else. You mean to say that you couldn't love me then?
Oh, well, that is clearly a metaphysical speculation, and like most metaphysical speculations, has very little reference at all to the actual facts of real life as we know them.
Yes, but to speak quite candidly, darling, I don't care much for the name of Ernest. I don't think the name suits me at all.
It suits you perfectly. It's a divine name. It has music of its own. It produces vibrations.
Oh, well, I think there are lots of other much nicer names. I think Jack, for instance, to be a charming name.
Jack? Oh, no. There's very little music in the name Jack. If any at all, indeed. It does not thrill, produces absolutely no vibrations. I have known several Jacks, and all of them, without exception, were more than usually plain. Besides, Jack is a notorious domesticity for John, and I pity any woman married to a man called John. Shall I never be allowed to know the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude? No. The only real safe name is Earnest.
Gwendolyn, I must get christened at once. No, I mean, we must get married at once. There is no time to be lost.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
No. Surely, you know that I love you, and you led me to believe, Miss Fairfax, you are not absolutely indifferent to me.
Well, I adore you. But you haven't proposed to me. Yet. Nothing is written at all about marriage. The subject hasn't even been touched on.
Well, may I propose to you now, then?
I think that would be an admirable idea. And to spare you any possible disappointment, Mr. Worthing, I think it's only fair to tell you quite frankly beforehand, I'm fully determined to accept you.
Gwendolyn!
Yes, Mr. Worthing! What have you got to say to me?
You know what I've got to say to you.
Yes, but you don't say it.
Gwendolyn,
Huh?
will you marry me?
Of course I will, my darling! How long have you been about it? I'm afraid you've had very little experience in how to propose.
My own one.
Yes, but men often propose a practice. I know my brother Gerald does. All my girlfriends tell me so. What wonderfully blue eyes you have, Ernest. They're quite blue. Oh, I hope you'll always look at me just like that, especially when there are other people present.
Mr. Worthing, rise from the semi-recumbent posture, sir. It is most indecorous.
Mamma, I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing has not quite finished yet.
Finished what, may I ask?
I am engaged to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
I beg your pardon. You are not engaged to anyone. And when you do become engaged to someone, I or your father, his health permitting, will inform you of the fact. An engagement is hardly a thing that a young lady should be allowed to decide for herself. And now, Mr. Worthing, I have a few questions I would wish to put to you. And while I am making these inquiries, Gwendolen, you will wait for me below in the carriage.
Mamma.
The carriage, Gwendolen.
Yes, Mamma.
Gwendolen, the carriage. You may take a seat, Mr. Worthing.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell. I prefer standing.
I feel bound to tell you that you are not down on my list of eligible young men. It is the same list as the dear Duchess of Bolton has. We work together on it. However, I am quite willing to enter your name should your answers be what a really affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Well, yes, I must admit I smoke.
I'm so pleased to hear it. A man should always have an occupation of some kind. There are far too many idle men in London as it is. How old are you?
29.
29. A very good age to be married at. I've always been of the opinion that a man who desires to get married should know either everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
So very pleased to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a rare, exotic fruit. Touch it, and the bloom is gone. Fortunately, the whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Education produces no effect in England whatsoever, for if it did, it would probably lead to acts of violence in Grosvenor Square. What is your income?
Between 7,000 and 8,000 a year.
In land or investments?
Investments, chiefly.
That is not unsatisfactory. What were the duties expected of one during one's lifetime, and the duties extracted after one's death? Land has ceased to be a profit or a pleasure. It gives one position, but prevents one from keeping it up. That is all that can be said about land.
I have a country house with some land attached to it, of course, about 1,600 acres, I believe, but I don't depend on that for my real income. In fact, as far as I can make out, the poachers are the only people who make anything out of it.
A country house? How many bedrooms? Oh, no matter. That point can be cleared up afterwards. You do have a townhouse, I hope. A girl with a simple, unspoilt nature such as Gwendolen can hardly be expected to reside in the country.
Well, I own a house in Belgrave Square, but it is let to the year by Lady Bloxham. Of course, I can get it back whenever I like, at 6 months' notice.
Lady Bloxham? I don't believe I know her.
Oh, she's a lady considerably advanced in years. She goes about very little.
Nowadays, that is no guarantee of respectability of character. What number, Belgrave Square?
149.
The unfashionable side. I thought there was something. However, that can easily be altered.
Do you mean the fashion or the side?
Both, if necessary, I presume. What are your politics?
Well, I'm afraid I really have none. I'm a liberal unionist.
Oh, well, they count as Tories. Well, they come in the evening and dine with us at any rate. Now, on to minor matters. Are your parents living?
I've lost both my parents.
Both? Mr. Worthing, to lose one parent may be regarded as a misfortune. To lose both looks like carelessness. Who was your father? He was evidently a man of some wealth. Was he born in what the radical papers call the purple of commerce, or did he rise from the ranks of the aristocracy?
Well, I'm afraid I really don't know. The fact is, Lady Bracknell, I said I'd lost both my parents. It would be nearer to the truth to say that my parents seem to have lost me. I don't know who I am by birth. I was found.
Found?
The late Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me, gave me the name of Worthing because he happened to have a first-class ticket to Worthing in his pocket at the time. Worthing is a place in Sussex. It's a seaside resort.
And where did this charitable gentleman with this first-class ticket to this seaside resort find you?
In a handbag?
A handbag?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, I was in a handbag. A somewhat large, brown, leather handbag with a handle to it. An ordinary handbag, in fact.
And where did this Mr. James or Thomas Cardew come across this ordinary handbag?
In the cloakroom of Victoria Station. It was given to him in mistake for his own.
The cloakroom at Victoria Station?
Yes. The Brighton line.
The line is immaterial, Mr. Worthing. To say I am somewhat bewildered by what you have told me, to be born or at any rate bred in a handbag, whether it has handles on it or not, seems to me to display an utmost contempt for the ordinary decencies of family life, which reminds one of the worst excesses of the French Revolution, and I presume you know what that unfortunate movement led to. And as for the particular locality in which the handbag was found, a cloakroom at a railway station, well, it may have proved to conceal a social indiscretion before now, and has probably been used for that purpose. But it can hardly be regarded as a recognized, assured basis for a recognized position in good society.
May I ask you then what you would advise me to do? I need hardly to say I would do anything in the world to ensure Gwendolyn's happiness.
I strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and acquire some relations as soon as possible, and to make every effort to produce one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
Well, I don't see how I could possibly manage to do that. I can produce the handbag at any moment. It is in my dressing room at home. I really think that should satisfy you, Lady Bracknell.
Me, sir? What has it got to do with me? You cannot imagine that I or Lord Bracknell would dream of allowing our only daughter, a girl brought up with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and to form an alliance with a parcel. Good morning, Mr. Worthing.
Good morning! Oh! For heaven's sake! Don't play that ghastly tune, Algie! How idiotic you are! Oh.
Didn't it go off all right, old boy? You don't mean to say Gwendolyn refused you? I know it is a way she has. Gwendolyn is always refusing people. I think it is most ill-natured of her.
Gwendolyn is right as a trivet. No, as far as she is concerned, we are engaged. Her mother is perfectly unbearable. Never met such a gorgon. I don't really know what a gorgon is like, but I'm quite sure Lady Bracknell is one. In any case, she is a monster without being a myth, which is rather unfair and... I beg your pardon, Algie. I don't suppose I should talk of your own aunt that way before you.
Oh, no. I love to hear my relations abused. It is the only thing that makes me put up with them in the first place. Relations are simply a tedious pack of people who haven't the remotest knowledge of how to live, nor the slightest instinct about when to die.
That is nonsense.
It isn't.
Oh, well, I won't argue about the matter. You always want to argue about things.
Well, that is exactly what things were originally made for.
Upon my word, if I thought that, I'd shoot myself. there's any chance of Gwendolyn becoming like her mother in about 150 years, do you, Algy?
All women become like their mothers. That is their tragedy. No man does. That's his.
Is that clever?
It's perfectly phrased. Quite as true as any observation in civilized life should be.
I'm sick to death of cleverness. Everybody is clever nowadays. You can't go anywhere without meeting clever people. The thing has become an absolute public nuisance. I wish to goodness we only had a few fools left.
We have.
Oh, I should extremely like to meet them. What do they talk about?
The fools? About the clever people, of course.
What fools?
By the way, did you tell Gwendolyn the truth about you being Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear fellow, the truth isn't quite the sort of thing one tells to a nice, sweet, refined girl. What extraordinary ideas you have about the way to behave to a woman.
The only way to behave to a woman is to make love to her if she is pretty, and to someone else if she is plain.
That is nonsense.
What about your brother, the profligate Earnest?
Oh, before the end of the week I shall have got rid of him. Now I'll say he died in Paris of apoplexy. Lots of people die quite suddenly of apoplexy, don't they?
Yes, but it's hereditary, my dear fellow. Sort of thing that runs in families. You had much better say a severe chill.
Oh. And you're sure a severe chill isn't hereditary or anything of that kind?
Of course it isn't.
Very well then. My poor brother Ernest carried off suddenly in Paris by a severe chill. That gets rid of him.
But I thought you said that little Miss Cardew was a bit too much interested in your poor brother Ernest. Won't she feel his loss a great deal?
Oh, Cecily is not a silly romantic girl, I'm glad to say. She's got a capital appetite, goes long walks and pays no attention at all to her lessons.
I'd rather like to meet Cecily.
Well, I shall take very good care you never do. She's excessively pretty and she's only just 18.
And have you told Gwendolyn yet that you have an excessively pretty ward who is only just 18?
Oh, one doesn't just blurt these things out to people. Cecily and Gwendolyn are perfectly certain to be extremely great friends. I'll bet you anything you like that half an hour after they've met, they'll be calling each other sister.
Women only do that after they have called each other a lot of other things first. Now, come on. If we wish to get a good table at Willis's, you really must go and dress. You know it is nearly 7. Oh.
It is always nearly 7.
Yes, well, I'm hungry.
I never knew you when you weren't.
Where should we go after dinner? To a theatre?
Oh, no. I loathe listening.
Or might we go to the club?
Oh, no. I hate talking.
How about we trot round to the Empire at 10?
No, I can't bear looking at things. It's so silly.
What shall we do?
Nothing.
It's awfully hard work doing nothing. However, I'm not opposed to hard work so long as there is no definite object of any kind.
Mr. Fox.
Gwendolyn, upon my word.
Algy, kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing.
Gwendolyn, really, I don't think I can allow this at all.
Algy, you always adopt a strictly immoral attitude towards life. You're not quite old enough to do that.
My own one.
Ernest, we may never be married. From the expression of Mamma's face, I fear we never shall. Few parents nowadays pay any regards to what their children say to them. The old-fashioned respect for the young is fast dying out. Whatever influence I had over Mamma, I lost at the age of 3. Although she may prevent us becoming man and wife, and I may marry someone else, and marry often, but nothing she can possibly do can alter my eternal devotion to you.
Gwendolyn, darling.
The story of your romantic origin, as related to me by Mamma with unpleasing comments, has naturally stirred the deeper fibres of my nature. Your Christian name has irresistible fascination. The simplicity of your character makes you exquisitely incomprehensible to me. Your town address at the Albany I have. What is your address in the country?
Oh. The Manor House,
Manor House,
Woolton,
Walton,
Hertfordshire.
Hertfordshire. There's a good postal service, I suppose. It may be necessary to do something desperate, but Well, that of course will require serious consideration. I'll communicate with you daily.
Oh, my own one.
How long do you remain in town?
Oh, till Monday.
Good. Oh, Algie, you may turn around now.
Thank you. I've turned round already.
And you may also ring the bell.
You'll let me see you to your carriage, my own darling?
Certainly.
I will see Miss Fairfax out.
Yes, sir.
A glass of sherry, Lane.
Yes, sir.
Tomorrow, Lane, I'm going Bunburying.
Yes, sir.
I shall probably not be back till Monday. You can hang up my dress clothes, my smoking jacket, and all the Bunbury suits.
Yes, sir.
I hope tomorrow will be a fine day, Lane.
It never is, sir.
You are a perfect pessimist.
I do my best to give you satisfaction, sir.
Now there is a sensible, intellectual girl. The only girl I ever cared for in all my life. What on earth are you so amused at?
Oh, I'm a little anxious about poor Bunbury, that's all.
If you don't take care, your friend Bunbury will get you into a serious scrape someday.
I love scrapes. They are the only thing that are never serious.
Oh, that is nonsense, Algie. You never talk anything but nonsense.
Nobody ever does.
as the watering of flowers is rather Morton's duty than yours. Especially at a moment when intellectual pleasures await you. Your German grammar is on the table. Pray open it at page 15. We will repeat yesterday's lesson.
But I don't like German. Well, it isn't at all a becoming language. I know perfectly well that I look quite plain after my German lesson.
Child, you know how anxious your guardian is that you should improve yourself in every way. He laid particular stress on your German as he was leaving for town yesterday. Indeed, he always lays stress on your German when he is leaving for town.
Well, Uncle Jack is so very serious. Sometimes he is so serious that I think he cannot be quite well.
Your guardian enjoys the best of health, and his gravity of demeanour is especially to be commended in one so comparatively young as he is. I know no one who has a higher sense of duty and responsibility.
I suppose that is why he often looks a little bored when we three are together.
Cecily, I am surprised at you. Mr. Worthing has many troubles in his life. Idle merriment and triviality would be out of place in his conversation. You must remember his constant anxiety about that unfortunate young man, his brother.
I wish Uncle Jack would allow that unfortunate young man, his brother, to come down here sometimes. I think we might have a good influence over him, Miss Prism. I am sure you certainly would. You know, German and geography and things of that kind influence a man very much.
I do not think that even I could produce any effect on a character that, according to his own brother's admission, is irretrievably weak and vacillating. Indeed, I'm not sure that I would desire to reclaim him. I am not in favour of this modern mania for turning bad people into good people at a moment's notice. As a man sows, so let him reap. Cecily, you must put away your diary. I really don't see why you should keep a diary at all.
I keep a diary in order to enter all the wonderful secrets of my life. If I didn't write them down, I should probably forget all about them.
Memory, my dear Cecily, is a diary that we all carry about with us.
Yes, but it usually chronicles the things that have never happened and couldn't possibly have happened. Well, I believe that memory is responsible for nearly all the 3-volume novels that Moody sends us.
Do not speak slice to me of the 3-volume novel, Cecily. I wrote one myself in earlier days.
Did you really, Miss Prism? How wonderfully clever you are! I hope it did not end happily. I don't like novels that end happily. They depress me so much.
The good ended happily and the bad unhappily. That is what fiction
I
means.
suppose so, but it seems very unfair. Well, was your novel ever published?
Alas, no. The manuscript, unfortunately, was abandoned. To your work, child. These speculations are profitless.
But here is dear Dr. Chasuble coming up through the garden.
Oh, Dr. Chasuble, this is indeed a pleasure.
And how are we this morning? Miss Prism, you are, I trust, well?
Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache. I think it would do her so much good to take a short stroll in the park with you, Dr. Chasuble.
Cecily, I have not mentioned anything about a headache.
No, dear Miss Prism, I know that. But I felt instinctively that you had a headache. Indeed, I was thinking about that and not about my German lesson when the good rector came in.
I hope, Cecily, you are not inattentive.
I'm afraid I am.
That is strange. Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. I spoke metaphorically. My metaphor was drawn from bees. Mr. Worthing, I suppose, has not returned from town yet.
Oh, we do not expect him till Monday afternoon.
Ah, yes. He usually likes to spend his Sunday in London. He's not one of those whose sole aim is enjoyment, as by all accounts that unfortunate young man his brother seems to be. But I must not disturb Egeria from her pupil any longer.
Egeria, my name is Laetitia, Doctor.
Oh, a classical allusion merely drawn from the pagan authors. I shall see you both, no doubt, at evensong.
I think, dear Doctor, I will have a stroll with you. I find I have a headache after all, and to walk might do it good.
With pleasure, Miss Prism, with pleasure. We might go as far as the schools and back.
Oh, that would be delightful. Oh, Cecily, you will read your political economy in my absence. The chapter on the fall of the rupee you may omit. It is somewhat too sensational. Even these metallic problems have their melodramatic side.
Oh, horrid political economy, or horrid geography, horrid German.
Mr. Worthing is just living over the station, miss. And he has brought his luggage with him.
Mr. Earnest Worthing, before the Albany W. Uncle Jack's brother. Did you tell him Mr. Worthing was in town?
Yes, miss. He seems very much disappointed. I've mentioned that you and Miss Prism were in the garden, And he wanted a private moment with you.
Ask Mr. Earnest Worthing to come out here. And I suppose you'd better talk to the housekeeper about a room for him.
Yes, miss.
I have never met any really wicked person before. I feel rather frightened. I am so afraid he will look just like everybody else. He does.
You are my little cousin Cecily, I'm sure.
You are under some strange mistake. I am not little. In fact, I believe I am more than usually tall for my age. But I am your cousin Cecily. You, I see from your card, are Uncle Jack's brother. My cousin Ernest. My wicked cousin Ernest.
Oh, I am not really wicked at all, cousin Cecily. You mustn't think that I am wicked.
If you are not, then you have certainly been deceiving us all in a most inexcusable manner. I hope you have not been living a double life, pretending to be wicked and being really good all the time. That would be hypocrisy.
Of course, I have been rather reckless.
I'm so glad to hear it.
In fact, now that you mention the subject, I have been very bad in my own small way.
Well, I don't think you should be so proud of it. I'm sure it must be very pleasant.
It is much pleasanter being here with you.
I can't understand how you are here at all. Uncle Jack is not due back until Monday afternoon.
That is a great disappointment. I'm obliged to go up by the first train Monday morning. I have a business appointment that I am anxious to miss.
Couldn't you sit anywhere but in London?
No, the appointment is in London.
Well, of course I know how important it is not to keep a business engagement if one wants to retain any sense of the beauty of life. But I still think you had better wait here until Uncle Jack comes home. I know he wanted to speak to you about your emigrating.
About my what?
Your emigrating? Well, he's gone up to buy your outfit.
I certainly wouldn't let Jack buy my outfit. He has no taste in neckties at all.
I don't think you will require neckties. Uncle Jack is sending you to Australia.
Australia? I'd rather die.
Well, he said at dinner on Wednesday night that you would have to choose between this world, the next world, or Australia.
The accounts I have received of the next world and Australia are not particularly encouraging. This world is good enough for me, cousin Cecily.
Yes, but are you good enough for it?
I'm afraid I am not that, which is why I would like you to reform me. You might make that your mission, if you don't mind, cousin Cecily.
Well, I'm afraid I've no time this afternoon.
Might you mind my reforming myself this afternoon?
It's rather quixotic of you, but I think you should try.
I will. I feel better already.
You're looking a little worse.
That is because I am hungry.
How thoughtless of me. I should have remembered that when one is going to embark on an entirely new life, one requires regular and wholesome meals. Won't you come in?
Thank you. Might I have a buttonhole first? I have never any appetite unless I have a buttonhole first.
A marshmallow?
No. I'd sooner have a pink rose.
Why?
Well, because you are like a pink rose, cousin Cecily.
I don't think you should speak to me like that. Miss Prism never says such things to me.
Well, then Miss Prism is a short-sighted old lady. You are the prettiest girl I ever saw.
Miss Prism says that all good looks are a snare.
They are a snare which every sensible man would like to be caught in.
I don't think I should care to catch a sensible man. I wouldn't know what to talk to him about.
Oh, you're too much alone, dear Dr. Chasuble. You should get married. A misanthrope, I can understand. A womanthrope, never.
Oh, believe me, I do not deserve so neo-logistic a phrase. The precept, as well as the practice of the primitive church, is distinctly against matrimony.
That is obviously the reason why the primitive church has not lasted up to the present day. And you do not seem to realise, dear Doctor, that by persistently remaining single, a man converts himself into a permanent public temptation. Men should be more careful. This very celibacy leads weaker vessels astray.
But is a man not equally attractive when married?
Oh, no married man is ever attractive except to his wife.
And often I've been told not even to her.
That depend on the intellectual sympathies of the woman. Maturity can always be depended on. Ripeness can be trusted. Young women are green. I spoke horticulturally. My metaphor was drawn from fruits. But where is Cecily?
Perhaps she followed us to the schools.
Oh, Mr. Worthing.
Mr. Worthing?
This is indeed a surprise. We did not look for you till Monday afternoon.
I've returned sooner than I expected. Dr. Chasuble, I hope you're well.
My dear Mr. Worthing, I trust this garb of woe does not betoken some terrible calamity.
My brother,
More shameful debts and extravagance.
Still leading his life of pleasure.
dead.
Your brother Earnest, dead.
Quite dead.
What a lesson for him. I trust he will profit by it.
Mr. Worthing, I offer you my sincere condolence. You have at least the consolation of knowing you were always the most generous and forgiving of brothers.
Poor Ernest. He had many faults, but this is a sad, sad blow.
Very sad indeed. Were you with him at the end?
No, he died in Paris. I had a telegram last night from the manager of the Grand Hotel.
Was the cause of death mentioned?
Severe chill, it seems.
That's a man so let him read.
Charity, dear Miss Prison, charity. None of us are perfect. I myself am peculiarly susceptible to drafts. Will the interment take place here?
Oh no, he's expressed a desire to be buried in Paris.
In Paris? I fear that hardly points to any very serious state of mind at the last. You would no doubt wish me to make some slight allusion to this tragic domestic affliction next Sunday. My sermon on the meaning of the manna in the wilderness can be adapted to almost any occasion. Joyful, or, as in the present case, distressing. I've preached it at harvest celebrations, christenings, confirmations, on days of humiliation and festal days. The last time I delivered it was in the cathedral as a charity sermon on behalf of the Society for the Prevention of Discontent amongst the Upper Orders. The bishop who was present was much struck by some of the analogies I drew.
That reminds me, Dr. Chasuble, you mentioned christenings, I believe. I suppose you know how to christen all right? Oh, I mean, of course you are. You're continually christening, aren't you?
It is, I regret to say, one of the rector's most constant duties in this parish. I have often spoken to the poorer classes on the subject, but they don't seem to know what thrift is.
But is there any particular infant in whom you are interested, Mr. Worthing? Your brother was, I believe, unmarried, was he not?
Oh, yes.
People who live entirely for pleasure usually are.
But it is not for any child, dear doctor. I'm very fond of children. No, I would like to be christened myself. This afternoon, if you have nothing better to do.
But surely, Mr. Worthing, you have been christened already.
I don't remember anything about it.
Have you any grave doubts on the subject?
I certainly intend to have. I don't know whether the thing would bother you in any way, or whether you think I'm a little too old now.
Oh, not at all. The sprinkling and indeed the immersion of adults is a perfectly canonical practice.
Immersion?
Oh, you need have no apprehension. Sprinkling is all that is necessary, or indeed I think advisable. Our weather is so changeable. At what hour would you wish the ceremony performed?
Oh, I might trot around about 5 if that would suit you.
Perfectly, perfectly. I have 2 similar ceremonies to be performed at that time. A case of twins occurred recently in one of the outlying cottages on your own estate. Poor Jenkins the carter, a most hard-working man.
I don't see much fun in being christened alongside other children. It would be childish. Would 5:30 do?
Admirably, admirably. Now, dear Mr. Worthing, I will not intrude any longer into a house of sorrow. I would merely beg you not to be too much bowed down by grief. What seem to us bitter trials are often blessings in disguise.
This seems to me a blessing of an extremely obvious kind.
Uncle Jack! Oh, I'm so glad to see you back. But what horrid clothes you've got on. Do go and change.
Cecily!
My child, my child.
What's the matter, Uncle Jack? You look happy. You look as though you had a toothache, and I have got such a surprise for you. Who do you think is in the dining room? Your brother.
Who?
Your brother Ernest. Well, he arrived about half an hour ago.
What nonsense! I haven't got a brother.
Oh, don't say that, Uncle Jack. However badly he may have behaved to you in the past, he is still your brother. You wouldn't be so heartless as to disown him, would you? I'll tell him to come out. And you will be kind to him, won't you, Uncle Jack?
These are very joyful tidings.
After we had all been resigned to his loss, his sudden return seems to be peculiarly distressing.
My brother is in the dining room. I don't know what this all means. It seems to me to be perfectly absurd. Good heavens!
Brother John! I have come down from town expressly to tell you that I am very sorry for all the trouble I have given you, and that I intend to lead a better life in the future.
Uncle Jack, if you don't shake hands with your brother, I don't know what I'll do.
Oh, nothing will induce me to take his hand. He knows perfectly well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice. Well, Ernest has just been telling me all about his poor invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, whom he is so good as to go and visit. Well, surely there must be much good in one who leaves the pleasures of London to sit by a bed of pain.
Bunbury? He's been talking about Bunbury, has he?
Yes, he's told me all about poor Mr. Bunbury and his terrible state of health.
Well, I won't have him talk to you about Bunbury or anything else. It is enough to drive one perfectly frantic.
Of course, I admit that all the faults lay on my side. But I must say, I find Brother John's coldness to be painful. I had expected a more enthusiastic welcome, especially considering it is the first time I have come here.
Uncle Jack, if you don't shake hands with Ernest, I shall never forgive you.
Never forgive me.
Never, never, never!
Well, this is the last time I shall ever do it.
Oh, it is pleasant, is it not, to see so perfect a reconciliation? I think we might leave the two brothers together.
Cecily, you will come with us.
Certainly, Miss Prism. My little task of reconciliation is quite over.
You have done a beautiful action today, dear child.
We must not be premature in our judgment.
Well, I feel very happy.
Algy, you young scoundrel, you must get out of this place as soon as possible. I don't allow any bunburying here.
I have put Miss Ernest working. His sticks in the room next to your own, sir.
What?
His luggage, sir. I have unpacked it and put it in the room next to your own.
His luggage?
Yes, sir. 3 portmanteaus, a dressing case, 2 hat boxes, and a large luncheon basket.
I'm afraid I can't stay more than a week this time.
Merriman, order the dog cart at once.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Earnest has been suddenly called back to town.
What a fearful liar you are, Jack. I haven't been called back to town at all.
Yes, you have.
I haven't heard anyone call me.
Oh, your duty as a gentleman calls you back.
My duty as a gentleman has never interfered with my pleasures in the slightest degree.
I can quite understand that.
Very well. Cecily is a darling.
You are not to talk of Miss Cardew like that. I don't like it.
Well, I don't like your clothes. You look perfectly ridiculous in them. Why on earth don't you go up and change? It is perfectly childish to be in deep mourning for a man who is actually staying with you for a whole week in your house as a guest. I call it grotesque.
You are not staying with me for a whole week as a guest or anything else. You have got to leave by the 4:05 train.
Well, I certainly won't leave you so long as you are in mourning. I should think it most unfriendly. Well, if I were in mourning, you would stay with me, I suppose. I should think it very unkind if you didn't.
Well, will you go if I change my clothes?
Yes. If you're not too long. I never saw anybody take so long to dress and with such little result.
Well, at least that is better than always being overdressed, as you are.
If I am occasionally a little overdressed, I make up for it by being always so immensely overeducated.
Your vanity is ridiculous. your conduct an outrage, and your presence in my garden utterly absurd. However, you have got to catch the 4:05, and I hope you'll have a pleasant journey back to town. This Bunbury, as you call it, has not been a great success for you.
I think it has been a great success. I am in love with Cecily, and that is everything. But I must see her again before I go. Make arrangements for another Bunbury. Oh, there she is.
Oh, I merely came back to water the roses. I thought you were with Uncle Jack.
He's gone to order the dog cart for me.
Is he going to take you for a nice drive?
He's going to send me away.
Then we've got to part.
I'm afraid so. It's a very painful parting.
It is always painful parting from people whom one has known for a very brief space of time. Well, the absence of old friends one can endure with equanimity. But even a momentary separation from anyone to whom one has just been introduced is almost unbearable.
Thank you.
Merriman!
The dog cart is at the door, miss.
Tell it to wait, Merriman, for 5 minutes.
Yes, miss.
Cecily, I hope I shall not offend you if I state quite frankly and openly that you seem to me to be, in every way, the visible personification of absolute perfection.
I think your frankness does you great credit, Ernest. If you will allow me, I will copy your remarks into my diary.
Oh, do you really keep a diary? I'd give anything to look at it, may I?
No. You see, it is simply a very young girl's record of her own thoughts and impressions, and consequently meant for publication. When it appears in volume form, I hope you will order a copy. But pray, Ernest, don't stop. I delight in taking down from dictation. I have reached absolute perfection. You can go on. I am quite ready for more. But don't cough, Ernest. But when one is dictating, one should speak fluently and not cough. Besides, I don't know how to spell a cough.
Cecily, ever since I have first looked upon your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I have dared to love you. Wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly.
I don't think you should tell me that you love me wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly. Well, hopelessly doesn't seem to make much sense, does it?
Cecily!
The dog cart is at the door, sir!
Tell it to come round next week at the same hour.
I think Uncle Jack would be very much annoyed if he found out you were staying on until next week at the same hour.
I don't care about Jack. I don't care for anybody in the whole world but you. I love you, Cecily. You will marry me, won't you?
You silly boy, of course. Why, we have been engaged for the last 3 months.
For the last 3 months?
Yes. Well, it will be exactly 3 months on Thursday.
But how did we become engaged?
Well, ever since dear Uncle Jack first confessed to us that he had a younger brother who was very wicked and bad, you of course formed the chief topic of conversation between myself and Miss Prism. And of course a man who is much talked about is always very attractive. One feels there must be something in him, after all. Well, I dare say it was foolish of me, but I fell in love with you, Ernest.
Oh, darling. And when was the engagement actually settled?
On the 14th of last February, worn out by your entire ignorance of my existence, I determined to put an end to the matter one way or the other. And after a long struggle with myself, I accepted you under that dear old tree there. The next day I went and bought this little bangle with the true lover's knot, which I promised you always to wear.
Did I give you this? Very pretty, isn't it?
Yes. You've wonderfully good taste, Ernest. It's the excuse I've always given for your leading such a bad life. And here is the little box in which I keep all your dear letters.
My letters? But my own child, I have never written you any letters.
You need hardly remind me of that, Ernest. I remember only too well being forced to write your letters for you. I wrote always 3 times a week. And sometimes oftener.
Oh, do let me read them.
I couldn't possibly. They would make you far too conceited. The 3 you wrote me after I had broken off the engagement were so beautiful and so badly spelt that even now I can hardly read them without crying a little.
Our engagement was broken off.
Well, of course it was. On the 22nd of last March. You can see the entry for yourself if you like. Today I broke off my engagement with Earnest. I feel it is better to do so. The weather still continues charming.
Why on earth did you break it off? What had I done? I've done nothing at all. Cecily, I'm very much hurt indeed to hear you broke it off, particularly when the weather was so charming.
Well, it would hardly have been a really serious engagement if it hadn't been broken off at least once. Besides, I forgave you after the week was out.
What a perfect angel you are.
You dear romantic boy. I hope your hair curls naturally. Does it?
Yes, with a little help from others.
I'm so glad.
You won't break off our engagement again, will you?
Well, I don't think I could break it off now that I have actually met you. Besides, of course, there is the question of your name.
Of course.
Now, don't laugh at me, darling, but it had always been a girlish dream of mine to love someone whose name was Earnest. Well, there is something in that name that seems to inspire absolute confidence. I pity any poor married woman whose husband is not called Earnest.
But my own dear child, you mean to say you could not love me if I had some other name?
But what name?
Or any name you like. Algernon, for instance.
I don't like the name of Algernon.
Well, my own sweet, dear, lovely little angel darling, I don't see really why you should object to the name of Algernon. It's not at all a bad name. In fact, it's rather an aristocratic name. Over half of the chaps who get into the bankruptcy court are called Algernon. But seriously, Cecily, if my name were Algie, couldn't you love me?
I might respect you, Ernest. I might admire your character, but I fear I should not be able to give you my undivided attention.
Cecily, your rector here is, I suppose, thoroughly experienced in the rites and ceremonials of the church?
Yes, well, Dr. Chasuble is a most learned man. He's never written a single book, so you can imagine how much he knows.
I must see him at once on a most important christening. Business on a most important business.
Oh?
I shan't be more than half an hour.
Considering that we have been engaged since the 14th of February, and I have only met you for the first time today, I think it is rather harsh that you would leave me for so long a period as half an hour. Couldn't you make it 20 minutes?
I will be back in no time.
What an impetuous boy he is! And I like his hair so much. I must enter his proposal into my diary.
Miss Fairfax has called looking for Mr. Worthing. Important business, Miss Fairfax states.
Isn't Mr. Worthing in his library?
Mr. Worthing went to the direction of the rectory some time ago.
Well, ask the lady to come out here. I'm sure Mr. Worthing will be back before long. You can take those.
Yes, miss.
And bring tea.
Yes, miss.
Miss Fairfax? I suppose one of the many good elderly women whom my uncle associates with in London in some of his philanthropic work. I don't quite like women who are interested in philanthropic work. I think it's so forward of them.
Miss Fairfax.
Pray, let me introduce myself to you. My name is Cecily Cardew.
Cecily Cardew. What a very sweet name. Something tells me we're going to be great friends. I like you already more than I can say. And my first impressions of people are never wrong.
How nice of you to like me so much after such a comparatively short time. Pray, sit down.
I may call you Cecily, may I not?
With pleasure.
And you will always call me Gwendolen, won't you?
If you wish.
Then that is all quite settled, is it not?
I hope so.
Perhaps this might be a favourable opportunity for my mentioning who I am. My father is Lord Bracknell. You've never heard of Papa, I suppose?
I don't think so.
Outside the family circle, Papa, I am glad to say, is entirely unknown. And I think that is quite as it should be. The home seems to me to be the proper sphere for a man. And certainly once a man begins to neglect his domestic duties, he becomes painfully effeminate. Does he not? And I don't like that. It makes men so very attractive. Cecily, Mamma, whose views on education is remarkably strict, has brought me up to be extremely short-sighted. It's part of her system. Do you mind me taking a closer look at you?
Oh, not at all, Gwendolen. I'm very fond of being looked at.
Well, you're here on a short visit, I suppose?
No, I live here.
Oh. Well, your mother, no doubt, or some female relative of advanced years resides here also?
No, I have no mother, nor in fact any relations.
Indeed.
My dear guardian, with the assistance of Miss Prism, has the arduous task of looking after me.
Your guardian?
Yes, well, I'm Mr. Worthing's ward.
Well, he never mentioned to me that he had a ward. How secretive of him. He grows more interesting hourly. I'm not sure, however, that the news fills me with feelings of unmixed delight. I'm very fond of you, Cecily. I've liked you ever since I met you. But I'm bound to state that, well, now that I know that you're Mr. Worthing's ward, I cannot help expressing a wish that you were, well, just a little bit older than you seem to be, and not quite so very alluring in appearance. In fact, if I may speak candidly,
Pray do. When one has anything unpleasant to say, one should always be quite candid.
well, to speak with perfect candour, Cecily, I wish that you were fully 42 and more than usually plain for your age. Ernest has a strong, upright nature. He's the very soul of truth and honour. Disloyalty would be as impossible to him as deception. But even men of the noblest possible moral character are extremely susceptible to the influence of the physical charm of others. Modern, no less an ancient history, supplies us with many most painful examples of what I refer to. Well, if it were not, history would be quite unreadable.
I beg your pardon, Gwendolen, but did you say Ernest?
Yes.
But it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is my guardian. It is his brother, his elder brother.
Ernest never mentioned to me he had a brother.
I'm sorry to say that they have not been on good terms for a long time.
Ah. Well, that accounts for it. And now I think of it, I have never heard any man mention a brother. The subject seems distasteful to most men. Oh, Cecily, you've lifted a load from my mind. I was growing almost anxious. It would have been terrible if any cloud had come over a friendship like ours. But you are quite sure that it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is your guardian?
Quite sure. In fact, I am going to be his...
I beg your pardon?
Dearest Gwendolen, well, I see no reason to keep a secret of the matter from you. Our little county newspaper is sure to chronicle it next week. Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
I think there must be some slight error. I am engaged to be married to Mr. Ernest Worthing. The announcement will appear in the Morning Post on Saturday at the latest.
I am afraid you are under some mistake. Mr. Worthing proposed to me not 10 minutes ago.
Well, it is certainly very curious. He asked me to be his wife yesterday afternoon at 5:30, if you'd care to verify the incident. I never travel without my diary. One should always have something sensational to read in the train. I'm so sorry, dear Cecily, if it is any disappointment to you, but I'm afraid I have the prior claim.
It would pain me more than I can tell you, dearest Gwendolyn, if it caused you any physical or mental anguish, but I feel bound to point out that since Ernest proposed to you, he has clearly changed his mind.
Well, if the poor fellow has been entrapped into any foolish promise, I shall consider it my duty to rescue him at once, and with a firm hand.
Whatever unfortunate entanglement my dear boy may have gotten himself into, I shall not reproach him with it after we are married.
You allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement. You are presumptuous. On an occasion of this kind, it becomes more than a moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
How dare you! Do you suggest, Miss Fairfax, that I entrapped Ernest into an engagement? This is no time for wearing the shallow mask of manners. When I see a spade, I call it a spade.
Well, I'm glad to say I've never seen a spade. It's obvious that our social spheres are widely different.
Shall I write here, Susan? Please?
Yes, as usual.
Are there many interesting walks in the vicinity, Miss Cardew?
Oh, yes, a great many. From the top of one of the hills quite close, one can see 5 counties.
Oh, 5 counties? I don't think I should like that. I hate crowds.
I suppose that is why you live in town.
Quite a well-kept garden this is, Miss Cardew.
So glad you like it, Miss Fairfax.
I had no idea there were any flowers in the country.
Flowers are as common here, Miss Fairfax, as people are in London.
Personally, I cannot understand how anyone manages to exist in the country. If anybody who is anybody does. The country always bores me to death.
I believe that is what the newspapers refer to as agricultural depression, is it not? I believe the aristocracy is suffering from it a great deal at present. It is almost an epidemic among them, I've been told. May I offer you some tea, Miss Fairfax?
Thank you. Detestable girl, but I require tea. Thank you. No, thank you. Sugar isn't fashionable anymore.
Cake or bread and butter?
Bread and butter, please. Cake is rarely seen in the best households nowadays.
Hand that to Miss Fairfax.
My tea with lumps of sugar. And though I asked most distinctly for bread and butter, you've given me cake. I am known for the gentleness of my disposition and the extraordinary sweetness of my nature, but I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
To save my poor, innocent, trusting boy from the machinations of any other girl, there are no lengths to which I would not go.
From the moment I saw you, I distrusted you. I felt that you were false and deceitful. I am never deceived in such matters. My first impressions of people are invariably right.
It seems to me, Miss Fairfax, that I am trespassing upon your valuable time. I am sure you have many similar calls of a fellow character to make in the neighbourhood.
Ernest!
Gwendolyn, darling.
A moment. May I ask, are you engaged to be married to this young lady here?
The dear little Cecily. Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I knew there must be some misunderstanding, Miss Fairfax. Well, the gentleman whose arm is at present round your waist is my guardian, Mr. John Worthing.
I beg your pardon?
This is Uncle Jack.
Jack!
Here is Ernest. A moment, Ernest. May I ask, are you engaged to be married to that young lady?
To what young lady?
Oh,
Good heavens, Gwendolyn.
Yes, to good heavens, I mean, yes, to Gwendolyn.
Well, of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I felt there must be some slight error. The man who's now embracing you is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrief.
Algernon Moncrief. Oh. Are you really called Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Oh, is your name really John?
I could deny it if I liked. I could deny anything if I liked, but my name certainly is John. It has been John for years.
It seems a gross deception has been practiced on both of us.
Oh, my poor wounded Cecily!
My sweet, wronged Gwendolyn.
You will call me sister, won't you? There is just one question I should like to ask my guardian. An admirable idea. Mr. Worthing, I have just one question I would like to be permitted to put to you. Where is your brother Ernest? We're both engaged to be married to your brother Ernest, so it is a matter of some importance to know where your brother Ernest is at present.
Gwendolyn, Cecily, it pains me very much to have to speak the truth. It is the first time in my life I've ever been reduced to such a painful position, and I'm really quite inexperienced in doing anything of the kind. But I will tell you frankly that I have no brother Ernest. I have no brother at all. I have never had a brother in all my life, and I have not the smallest intention of ever having one in the future.
No brother? At all?
None.
Had you never a brother of any kind?
Never, not even of any kind.
I'm afraid it is quite clear, dear Cecily, that neither of us is engaged to be married to anyone.
It is not a very pleasant position for a young girl suddenly to find herself in, is it?
Let us go into the house. They'll hardly venture to come after us there.
No. Men are so cowardly, aren't they?
This ghastly state of things is what you call bunburying, I suppose.
Yes. What a perfectly wonderful Bunbury it is. The most wonderful Bunbury I have ever had in my life.
Well, you have no right whatsoever to Bunbury here.
That is absurd. One has a right to Bunbury wherever one chooses. Every serious Bunburyist knows that.
Serious Bunburyist? Good heavens.
Well, one must be serious about something if one wants any amusement in life. I happen to be serious about Bunbury. What on earth you are serious about, I haven't the slightest idea. About everything I should fancy. You have such a ridiculous nature.
Well, the only small satisfaction I get out of the whole of this wretched business of yours is that your friend Bunbury is quite exploded. You won't be able to run down to the country quite so often as you used to, dear Algy, and a very good thing too.
Your brother is a little off colour, isn't he, dear Jack? Won't be able to disappear to London quite so frequently as your wicked custom has. And not a bad thing either.
As for your conduct towards Miss Cardew, I must say that you're taking in a sweet, simple, innocent girl like that quite inexcusable, to say nothing of the fact that she is my ward.
I can see no possible defence at all, dear Jack, for your deceiving a brilliant, clever, thoroughly experienced young lady like Miss Fairfax. To say nothing of the fact that she is my cousin.
I wanted to be engaged to Gwendolyn. I love her, that is all.
Well, I simply wanted to be engaged to Cecily. I adore her.
Well, there is certainly no chance of your marrying Miss Cardew.
I don't think there is much likelihood, Jack, of you and Miss Fairfax being united.
Well, that is no business of yours.
Oh, if it were my business, I wouldn't talk about it. It's very vulgar to talk about one's business. Only people like stockbrokers do that. And then merely at dinner parties.
How you can sit there, calmly eating muffins while we're in this horrible trouble I can't quite make out. You seem to me to be perfectly heartless.
Well, I can hardly eat muffins in an agitated manner, can I? The butter would probably get on my cuffs. One must always eat muffins calmly. It is the only way to eat them.
Well, I say it's perfectly heartless. You're eating muffins at all under the circumstances.
When I am in trouble, eating is the only thing that consoles me. Indeed, when I am in very great trouble, as anyone who knows me intimately might tell you, I refuse everything, except food and drink. At this present moment, I am eating muffins because I am unhappy. Besides, particularly fond of muffins.
Well, that is no reason why you should eat them all in that greedy way.
I wish you would have tea cake. I don't like tea cake.
Oh, good heavens, I suppose a man made his own muffins in his own garden.
But you have just said it was perfectly heartless to eat muffins.
I said it was perfectly heartless of you under the circumstances. That is a very different thing.
Quite so. But the muffins are the same.
Algernon, I wish to goodness you would go.
You can't possibly ask me to go without having some dinner. It's absurd. I never go without my dinner. Well, nobody ever does. Except vegetarians and people like that. Besides, I have just made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:45 under the name of Earnest.
My dear fellow, the sooner you give up that nonsense, the better. I already made arrangements myself with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:30, and I naturally will take the name of Earnest. Gwendolyn would wish it. We can't both be christened Earnest, it's absurd. Besides, I have every right to be christened if I like. There is no evidence to suggest I ever have been christened by anybody, and I should think it extremely probable I never was. So does Dr. Chasuble. It is entirely different in your case. You have been christened already.
Yes, but I have not been christened for years.
Yes, but you have been christened. That is the important thing.
Quite right. So I know my constitution can stand it. If you are unsure about your ever having been christened, I should think it quite dangerous you embark upon it now. I need hardly remind you, someone very close to you this week was very nearly carried off in Paris by a severe chill.
Yes, but you said so yourself that a severe chill was not hereditary.
Well, it used to be, I know. But I dare say it is now. Science is always making wonderful advancements in things.
That is nonsense. You're always talking nonsense.
Jack, you're at the muffins again. I wish you wouldn't. There are only 2 left.
But I hate tea cake.
Well, then why on earth do you allow tea cake to be served up for your guests? What ideas you have of hospitality.
Algernon, I have already told you to go. I don't want you here. Why don't you go?
Well, I haven't quite finished my tea yet. And there are still some muffins left.
Ladies and gentlemen, there will now be a short intermission of 20 minutes, but do return to see the conclusion of the tea party.
Well, the fact they didn't follow us at once into the house seems to me to show they have some sense of shame left.
Well, they've been eating muffins. That looks like repentance.
They don't seem to notice us. Couldn't you cough?
I haven't got a cough.
Oh, they're looking at us. What effrontery.
Oh, they're approaching. That's very forward of them.
Let us preserve a dignified silence.
Certainly. It is the only thing to do now.
This dignified silence seems to produce an unpleasant effect.
A most distasteful one.
But we will not be the first to speak.
Certainly not.
Mr. Worthing, I have something very particular to ask you. Much depends on your reply.
Gwendolen, your common sense is invaluable. Mr. Moncrief, kindly answer me the following question. Why did you pretend to be my guardian's brother?
In order that I might have an opportunity of meeting you.
Well, that certainly seems like a satisfactory response, doesn't it?
Yes, dear, if you can believe him.
I don't, but it doesn't take away from the wonderful beauty of his answer.
True. In matters of grave importance, style, not sincerity, is the vital thing. Mr. Worthing, what explanation can you offer to me for pretending to have a brother? Was it in order that you might have an opportunity of coming up to town to see me as often as possible?
Can you doubt it, Miss Fairfax?
I have the gravest doubts upon the subject, but I intend to crush them. This is not the time for German scepticism. That seems like a satisfactory reply. What do you think?
Well, I am more than content with what Mr. Moncrief has said.
Then you think we should forgive them?
Yes. I mean, no.
True, I had forgotten. There are principles at stake. One cannot surrender. Which of us should tell them? The task is not a pleasant one.
Could we not both speak at the same time?
Excellent idea. I nearly always speak at the same time as other people. Will you take the time from me?
Certainly.
Your Christian names are still an insuperable barrier. That is all.
Our Christian names, is that all? But we are going to be christened this afternoon!
For my sake, you're prepared to do this terrible thing.
I am.
To please me, you are ready to face this fearful ordeal.
I am.
Oh, how absurd to talk of the equality of the sexes. Where questions of self-sacrifice are concerned, men are infinitely beyond us.
We are.
They have moments of physical courage about which we women know absolutely nothing.
Darling!
Darling. Oh, good heavens!
Gwendolen, what does this mean?
Merely that I'm engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Sit down immediately. Hesitation of any kind is a sign of mental decay in the young and physical weakness in the old. Apprise, sir, of my daughter's sudden flight by her trusty maid, whose confidence I purchased by means of a small coin. I followed her at once by luggage train. Our unhappy father, I am glad to say, is under the impression that she's attending a more than usually lengthy lecture by the University Extension Scheme on the influence of a permanent income on thought. I do not propose to undeceive him. Indeed, I have never undeceived him on any question. I would consider it wrong. So you must be perfectly aware that any communication between yourself and my daughter must cease immediately from this moment. On that point, and indeed on all points, I am firm.
But I am engaged to be married to Gwendolen, Lady Bracknell.
You are nothing of the kind, sir. And now as regards to Algernon. Algernon.
Yes, Aunt Augusta?
Is it in this house that your invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, resides?
No, Bunbury doesn't live here. Bunbury is somewhere else at present. In fact, Bunbury is dead.
Dead? When did Mr. Bunbury die? His death must have been extremely sudden.
I killed Bunbury this afternoon. I mean, poor Bunbury died this afternoon.
What did he die of?
Oh, Mr. Bunbury, he was quite, exploded.
Exploded? Was he the victim of a revolutionary outrage? I was not aware that Mr. Bunbury was interested in social legislation. If he was so well punished for his morbidity.
No, Aunt Augusta, I mean he was found out. I mean the doctors found out he could not live. That is what I mean. So Bunbury died.
Well, he seems to have had great confidence in the opinion of his physicians. I am glad, however, that he made up his mind at the last to some definite course of action and acted under proper medical advice. And now that we have finally got rid of this Mr. Bunbury, Mr. Worthing, may I ask, who is that young person whose hand my nephew is holding in what seems to me to be a peculiarly unnecessary manner?
That lady is Miss Cecily Cardew, my ward.
I am engaged to be married to Cecily, Aunt Augusta.
I beg your pardon?
Lady Bracknell, Mr. Moncrief and I are engaged.
I do not know whether there's anything particularly exciting in the air in this particular part of Hertfordshire, but the number of engagements that seem to go on seem to me to be above the proper average that statistics have laid down for their guidance. So I think some preliminary inquiries on my part would not be out of place. Mr. Worthing, is Miss Cardew at all connected to any of the larger railway stations in London? I ask merely for information. Until yesterday I was not aware that there were any persons or families whose origins were a terminus.
Miss Cardew is the granddaughter of the late Mr. Thomas Cardew of 149 Belgrave Square, SW, Gervais Park, Dorking, Surrey, and the Sporran, Fifeshire, NB.
That is not unsatisfactory. 3 addresses always inspire confidence, even in tradesmen. But what proof have I of their authenticity?
Oh, I've carefully preserved the court guides of the period. They're open to your inspection, Lady Bracknell.
I have known strange errors in that particular publication.
Miss Cardew's family solicitors are Mercers. Markby, Markby and Markby.
Markby, Markby and Markby. A firm of the very highest position in their profession. Indeed, I have been told that occasionally you may find one of the Markbys at dinner parties. So far, I am satisfied.
Oh, how extremely kind of you, Lady Bracknell. I have also in my possession, you'll be very pleased to hear, certificates of Miss Cardew's birth, baptism, whooping cough, registration, confirmation, vaccination, and the measles, both the German and the English variety.
A life crowded with incidents, I see. Though perhaps somewhat too exciting for a young girl. I myself have never been in favour of premature experiences. Come, Gwendolen, the time approaches for our departure. We have not a moment to lose. As a matter of form, Mr. Worthing, may I ask, has Miss Cardew any little fortune?
Oh, about £130,000 in the funds? That is all. No, goodbye, Lady Bracknell. So pleased to have seen you.
A moment, Mr. Worthing. £130,000 and in the funds. Miss Cardew seems to me a most attractive young lady now that I look at her. Few girls of the present day have any real solid qualities that will last and improve with time. We live, I regret to say, in an age of surfaces. Come over here, dear. Pretty child. Your dress is sadly simple. And your hair as if nature intended. But we can soon alter all that. Indeed, a thoroughly experienced French maid can produce a marvellous effect in a very brief space of time. Indeed, I remember recommending one to young Lady Lancing, and after 3 months, her own husband did not know her.
And after 6 months, nobody knew her.
Kindly turn round, sweet child. No. It is the side view that I want. Yes, just as I suspected, there are distinct social possibilities in your profile. The 2 weak points of her age are its want of principle and its want of profile. The chin, a little higher, dear. Style largely depends upon how the chin is worn. It is worn very high at present. Algernon, there are distinct social possibilities in Miss Cardew's profile.
Cecily is the sweetest, dearest, most beautiful girl in the whole world. I don't give a tuppence about social profile.
Never speak disrespectfully of society, Algernon. Only people who cannot get into it do that. My dear child, Of course, you are aware that Algernon has nothing but his debts to depend upon. But I have never been in favour of mercenary marriages. Indeed, when I married Lord Bracknell myself, I had no fortune of my own, but I never dreamt of allowing that to stand in my way. So I suppose I should give you my consent.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell.
You may also kiss me, Cecily.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell.
And you may also address me as Aunt Augusta in the future.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
I think the marriage should take place quite soon.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
To speak frankly, I've never been in favour of long engagements. They give people the opportunity to discover each other's character before marriage, which is never advisable.
I beg your pardon for interrupting you, Lady Bracknell, but this engagement is quite out of the question. I am Miss Cardew's guardian, and she cannot marry without my consent until she comes of age. That consent I absolutely decline to give.
On what grounds, may I ask? Algernon is an extremely, I may almost say, ostentatiously eligible young man. He has nothing, but looks everything. What more can one desire?
Well, it pains me very much to have to speak frankly to you, Lady Bracknell, about your nephew, but the fact is I do not approve at all of his moral character. I suspect him of being untruthful.
My nephew? Untruthful? Impossible. He is an Oxonian.
I fear there can be no possible doubt about the matter. This afternoon, during my temporary absence in London on an important question of romance, he obtained admission to my house under the false pretense of being my brother. Under an assumed name, he drank, I've just been informed by my butler, an entire pint bottle of Perrier Jouet 89 brew wine I was specially reserving for myself. Continuing his disgraceful deception, he succeeded in the course of the afternoon in alienating the affections of my only ward. He subsequently stayed to tea and devoured every single muffin. And what makes his conduct all the more heartless is that he was perfectly well aware from the first that I have no brother, that I never had a brother, and that I don't intend to have a brother, not even of any kind. I distinctly told him so myself yesterday afternoon.
After careful consideration, Mr. Worthing, I have decided to completely overlook my nephew's conduct towards you.
How extremely kind of you, Lady Bracknell. My own decision, however, is unalterable. I decline to give my consent.
My dear child, may I ask how old you are?
Well, I really am only 18, but I always admit to 20 at evening parties.
You're quite right in making some slight alteration. Indeed, no woman should be completely accurate about her age. It looks so calculating. 18, but admitting to 20 at evening parties. So it will not be very long before you are free from the restraints of tutelage. So therefore, I do not think that your guardian's consent is of any great importance.
Pray excuse me, Lady Bracknell, for interrupting you again, but I feel it is only fair to tell you that according to her grandfather's will, Miss Cardew does not come of age legally until she is 35.
That does not seem to be such a grave objection. Indeed, London society, my dear, is full of women of the very highest birth who have remained 35 for years. Lady Dumbleton is an incident in point. She has been 35 ever since she arrived at the age of 40, which is a very long time ago now. So I see no reason why you, my sweet child, should not be even more attractive at the age that is mentioned as you are at present. And there will be a large accumulation of property.
Algie, could you wait for me until I was 35?
Of course I could, Cecily. You know I could.
I felt it instinctively. But I couldn't wait all that time. Why, I hate waiting even 5 5 minutes for anybody. It always makes me rather cross. I am not punctual myself, I know, but I do like punctuality in others. And the thought of waiting even to be married is out of the question.
Well, then what is to be done, Cecily?
I don't know, Mr. Moncrief.
Mr. Worthing, dear Mr. Worthing, as Miss Cardew clearly states that she cannot wait until she's 35, a reply which shows a somewhat impatient nature, I beg of you to reconsider your decision.
Oh, but my dear Lady Bracknell, the matter is entirely in your own hands. The moment you consent to my marriage with Gwendolen, I will most gladly allow your nephew to form an alliance with my ward.
You must be perfectly aware that what you propose is out of the question.
Ooh, then a passionate celibacy is all any of us can look forward to.
That is not the destiny I propose for Gwendolen. Algernon, of course, can choose for himself. Come, Gwendolen, we have already missed 5, if not 6 trains. To miss any more, we might be subject to comment on the platform.
Everything is quite ready for the christenings.
Christening, sir? Are you not somewhat premature?
Well, both these gentlemen expressed a desire for immediate baptism.
At their age, the idea is grotesque and irreligious. Algernon, I forbid you to be baptized. I have not heard of anything of such excesses. Lord Bracknell would be most displeased if he was to learn how this is how you wasted your time and money.
Am I to understand then that there are to be no christenings at all this afternoon?
I don't think that as things are now, it would be of much practical value to either of us, Dr. Chasuble.
I'm grieved to hear such sentiments from you, Mr. Worthing. They savour of the heretical views of the Anabaptists, views that I've completely refuted in 4 of my unpublished sermons. However, as your present mood seems to be one peculiarly secular, I will return to the church at once. Indeed, I've just been informed by the pew opener that for the last hour and a half, Miss Prism has been waiting for me in the vestry.
Did I hear you just say Miss Prism?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, I'm on my way to join her.
A moment, sir. Pray, let me detain you. This information could be vitally important to myself and Lord Bracknell. Is this Miss Prism a female of repellent aspect, remotely attached to education?
She is the most cultivated of ladies and the very picture of respectability.
It is obviously the same person. May I ask what position she holds in your household?
I am a celibate, madam.
Miss Prism has been for the last 3 years Miss Cardew's esteemed governess and valued companion.
Despite what I hear of her, I must have her sent for. I must see her at once.
Oh, she approaches. She is nigh.
I was told you expected me in the vestry, dear Canon. I've been waiting for you there for an hour and 3/4.
Prism! Come here, Prism! Prism! 27 years ago, you left Lord Bracknell's house in charge of a perambulator which contained a baby of the male sex, but you never returned. Several weeks later, after the elaborate investigations of the Metropolitan Police, the perambulator was found standing by itself in a remote corner of Bayswater at midnight. It contained a manuscript of a 3-volume novel with more than unusually revolting sentimentality. But the baby was not there. Where is that baby?
Lady Bracknell, I admit with shame that I do not know. I only wish I did. The plain facts of the case are these. On the morning of the day you mention, a day that is forever branded on my memory. I prepared as usual to take the baby out in its perambulator. I had also with me a somewhat old but capacious handbag in which I had intended to place the manuscript of a work of fiction that I had written during my few unoccupied hours. In a moment of mental abstraction for which I can never forgive myself, I deposited the manuscript in the bassinet and placed the baby in the handbag.
But where did you deposit the handbag?
Oh,
Miss
do
Prism?
not ask me, Mr. Worthing.
Miss Prism, I insist on knowing where you deposited the handbag that contained that infant.
I left it in the cloakroom of one of the larger railway stations in London.
What railway station?
Victoria. The Brighton line.
I must retire to my room for a moment. Gwendolyn, wait here for me.
Well, if you're not too long, I'll wait here for you all my life.
What do you think this means, Lady Bracknell?
I dare not even imagine, Dr. Chandrabal. I need hardly tell you that in houses of high position, strange occurrences are not meant to happen. They are hardly considered the thing.
Uncle Jack seems strangely agitated.
Your guardian has a very emotional nature.
This noise is very irritating. It sounds like an argument. I dislike arguments in any way. They are always vulgar and often convincing.
Oh, it has stopped now.
I wish he would come to some conclusion.
The suspense is terrible. I hope it will last.
Miss Prism, is this the handbag that you deposited? Examine it carefully before you speak. The happiness of more than one life depends on your answer.
Well, it seems to be mine. Oh yes, here is the injury it received through the upsetting of a Gower Street omnibus in younger and happier days. Oh, here is the stain on the lining caused by the explosion of a temperance beverage, an incident that occurred at Leamington. Oh, and here on the lock are my initials. I had forgotten that in an extravagant mood I had had them placed there. Oh, the bag is undoubtedly mine. I am delighted to have it so unexpectedly restored to me. But it's been a great inconvenience being without it all these years. Oh.
Miss Prism, more is restored to you than that bag. I was the baby you placed in it.
You?
Yes, Mother!
Mr. Worthing! I am unmarried.
Unmarried? Well, I do not deny that is a serious blow, but who are we to cast stones against one who has suffered? Cannot repentance wipe out an act of folly? Huh? Why should there be one law for men and another for women? Mother, I forgive you!
Mr. Worthing, there is some error. There is a lady who can tell you who you really are.
Lady Bracknell, I hate to seem inquisitive, but would you kindly inform me who I am?
I am afraid the news I have to give you may not altogether please you. You are the son of my late sister, Mrs. Moncrief, and therefore, consequently, Algernon's elder brother.
Algie's elder brother! I knew I had a brother! I always said I had a mother! unfortunate brother, Miss Prism, my unfortunate brother, Gwendolyn, my unfortunate brother, Algie. You have got to treat me with more respect in the future. You have never treated me like a brother in all your life.
Not till today, old boy, I admit. I was a little out of practice.
My own one! But what own are you? What is your Christian name now that you've become someone else?
Oh, good heavens. I'd quite forgotten that point. I suppose your decision on my name is irrevocable.
I never change except in my affections.
What a noble nature you have, Gwendolyn.
Well, then the question had better be answered at once. Aunt Augusta, a moment. At the time when Miss Prism deposited me in the handbag, had I been christened already?
Every luxury that money could buy had been lavished upon you by your fond and doting parents, including christening.
Then I was christened after all. Now what name was I given? Let me know the worst.
Well, naturally, being the oldest child, you were christened after your father.
What was my father's Christian name?
Well, at the moment, I cannot recall what the general's name was, although he did have one. He was eccentric, I admit, but that was only in later life as a result of marriage, indigestion, and the Indian climate, and things of that kind.
Algie, can't you recollect what our father's Christian name was?
Well, we weren't exactly on speaking terms, brother. He died before I was a year old.
Oh. His name would appear in the army lists of the period, Aunt Augusta, wouldn't they?
The general was essentially a man of peace, except in his domestic life, but his name would appear in any of the military directories.
The military lists of the last 40 years are here! These glorious lists should have been my constant study. Oh! Okay. M generals! Woo! Oh, M generals, Malum, Maxbom, Magley. What ghastly names there! Markby, Migsby, Mobbs, Moncrief, Lieutenant 1840, Captain, Lieutenant Colonel, Colonel, General 1869. Christian names. Ernest John. I always told you, didn't I? My name was Earnest. Well, I mean, it is Earnest after all. I mean, it naturally is Earnest.
Oh, yes, I remember now. That was the general's name, Earnest. I knew I had a particular reason for disliking the name.
My own Ernest!
Oh.
I knew from the first you could have no other name.
Gwendolyn, it is a terrible thing for a man to find out suddenly that all his life he's been speaking nothing but the truth. Can you forgive me?
Yes. For I feel you are sure to change.
Oh, my own one.
Oh, Letitia!
Oh, Frederick, at last.
Cecily, darling, at last.
Gwendolyn, at last.
My dear nephew, you seem to be displaying signs of triviality.
Oh, on the contrary, Aunt Augusta. I've realised for the first time in my life the vital importance of being earnest.